But that's another option. There are actually municipal governments in New York that as soon as we can get these windmills are going to start earning their own direct money by being in the energy business and selling it back to the utilities. And wherever that's permitted, you ought to look at the economics of it and see if it works out. So but the bottom line here is that I think we'll get better national policy next year. I think we'll pass a cap and trade system and put a price on carbon. Both, I think, because I believe so strongly in this, I favor Senator Obama's position, which is to go to 80% reduction in greenhouse gases over Senator McCain's position, which is to go to 70. But the point is, that's light years ahead of where the Republicans have been too. So we're going to get that, unless just the obstructionists in Congress shut it down. But whatever happens, I'm telling you, the systems are not in place to make the changes. You can pass all the laws you want, and that's the last thing I want to emphasize how important this is. Let's talk about the Kyoto Accord. For those of us who care about this, most people think the worst tragedy was that the United States did not sign Kyoto. 170 countries, and we walked away. I agree that was a terrible mistake. But keep in mind, all those 170 countries promised to cut greenhouse gas emissions by some factor below what they were in 1990, right? It was easy for about 15 of them because they'd been part of the Soviet Union or the communist bloc. They rested on heavy carbon-intensive economies. Their economies collapsed after the Soviet Union collapsed. So whatever they do, they're not going to get back to 1990 levels of carbon usage in a more modern economy. So we'll put them to the side and say 155 countries really had to try. You know how many of them are going to meet their Kyoto targets? 6. Now, were the countries did they sign in bad faith? No. Were the leaders stupid, lazy, or corrupt? No. Did they have every intention of doing it when they did it? Absolutely. But they did not have the systems in place. You do this for a living. You have to figure out every day not only what you're going to do and what you're going to advocate, but how in the living daylights you're going to do it. And so again, the reason I have so passionate about this is I think you are problem solvers. That's the definition of your job. And what I'm trying to do with the foundation here is to just help as much as I can create systems that will turn good intentions into positive changes in an easier way. But I just want to let you know that, and the countries that are meeting the Kyoto targets, by the way, have been richly rewarded. When America's had flat wages and rising poverty and all these problems, Denmark's growing like crazy with a rising middle class and declining poverty because they grew their economy 50% without using one more watt of electricity, and they moved to 24% of their power generation from wind. The United Kingdom has had they're the European economy, most like ours. They've had no increase in income inequality in this decade when we had the biggest increase in 80 years since the 1920s. They've had none. Why? Because they're going to meet their Kyoto targets 2 years earlier than 2 years before 2012, and they've generated a gazillion jobs doing it. There have been 2 reports from the Exchequer documenting how many jobs have been created in what areas because they're going to meet and beat their Kyoto targets. And I could give you several other examples, but the point is, even if we get the very best federal legislation, you're going to have to figure out how to do it. And if the legislation is not how to, but just targets and markets, you're still going to have a system. So I urge you to go forward with this and do the very best you can, and I'll do whatever I can to help. Now let me just mention 2 other things very briefly. Most of you are dealing with the problems that the working families in your cities have. There are 28 million of them that have a real extra problem. In spite of all their costs and their wage problems, their health care worries, and their home mortgage worries, they don't even have a bank account, even though they get a check on a regular basis.